definition for small, micro, and medium enterprises. Today, we talked to the Caretaker Chief Executive Officer of the Local Enterprise Authority, Thato Jensen. He's exploring how this revised definition will better reflect current economic realities, support compliance with the Small Business Act of 2004 and the Industrial Development of 2019, and also how it will strengthen consistency in data collection, measurement, and national reporting. Jensen, thank you so much for joining us on the Daybreak. First, let's start here. Why? Yes, we are hearing that it would give a legally binding definition of what SMMEs are, but why should we do that?
Okay. Thank you very much, and good morning, Reggie. This is a very critical exercise in that I think we must remember that, the first time we tried to define what an SMME is in Botswana was in 1999 through the SMME policy of 1999. This is 26 years ago. The first attempt to gazette, should I say the first gazetting of the definition of SMME through the statutory instrument number 79 of 2011. And if you look at the gap between when the first definition was actually instituted through the policy and 2011, that's around 13 years. We have yet a new definition which was promulgated in 2019 through the National Entrepreneurship Policy. Now, this one is contained in a policy, and that makes it unenforceable in a way. I don't know how to enforce. As you know, policy are more, statements of intent as compared to your legal instruments. So over a 26-year period, we have not been able to keep up with the growth of the sector. Secondly, when it comes to issues of measurement, or should I say data-driven policy development and programming. Because we have no clear definitions, we're unable to touch it. We're unable to understand the dynamics of what a micro is, what a small enterprise is, and what a medium enterprise is. In particular, what the specific needs are. They're very, very different. So we are moving towards not only empirically based, or should I say data-driven policy development and programming for the sector, but also ensuring that we're able to measure and monitor their growth over time and be able to be more responsive and not reactive.
Right. From what you're saying, is it my understanding that this would need to be revised after a period of time since things change? Is that how it's going to be happening? Or there is just one understanding of what an SMME is and worldwide?
Well, worldwide there is a broad understanding, but then it then needs to be contextualized within the specific economies, I get it. For example, between 1961 and 2024, our economy has been growing at around 7.4%. Yes, we've had blips, that 2008, of course we had blips quite recently in 2024, as well as during the COVID pandemic. But the growth in economy also means that there will be a change in how firms respond or how firms grow. So there needs to be regularity and consistency in the gazetting of the definition of SMMEs. It could be a 3 to 5 year period. For instance, in South Africa, the most recent gazetting of the definition was in 2019. In Zambia, the latest was in 2023. Although it's contained in a policy, it has legal backing in terms of definition. And in Mauritius, in 2017. So they've been doing it quite regularly. Yeah. And that strengthens the SMME development framework.
And it's supposed to happen regularly.
Definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
Now, when you look at the what this is supposed to achieve for LEA, it gives you a better understanding of your clients and how their needs and how to package stuff for them. But what about for the SMMEs? What do they gain from this?
Okay. A World Bank study, let me just contextualize it for you. A World Bank study, 2023, I think they were using 2019 data, indicated that commercial banks only funded 8% of SMMEs, 8%. In terms of the development finance institutions, your NDBs, your CEDAs, only 20% of the SMMEs gained access to funding. When it comes to targeted programs, your YDF or your gender-based enterprise development programs, only 13% gained access to funding or support from these programs.
You're not happy with those figures?
They're very, very low. Let me even extrapolate it more. The International Finance Corporation in 2017 determined that in terms of a funding gap for the SMME sector, we stand at about 18.55% of GDP. Now in 2017, GDP ranged between 200 billion pula and 216 billion pula. If you translate that, it gives us around 32 billion pula in terms of a funding gap, or generally funding that should be directed or targeted towards the SMME sector. Why is that? The underlying challenge here and problem is that, or maybe the question we should be asking is, who are we funding? Do we know who we are funding? So that is why, in terms of defining, the SMME sector, what is a small, micro, medium sector becomes very, very critical. Yeah. And so that when we design financing instruments or when we design interventions, we know exactly the dynamics that we are responding to in developing the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the challenges do you foresee in embarking on this exercise now?
Well, there have been inconsistencies, in terms of the definition of what an SMME is across institutions. Commercial banks, for example, define an SMME as, an entity with a revenue of a minimum of 10 million pula and up to around 50 million pula. You go to Statistics Botswana, our national focal point in terms of statistics, they just look at employment and they look at 0 to 49 as a threshold for what an SMME is. And when you look at us, we are using both turnover and employment and relying on the national entrepreneurship policy. So the basic challenge that I see is us shifting towards normalizing and standardizing this definition. What we are saying is this: we're not saying by statutorily defining SMMEs, we are not saying banks should, in terms of their commercial interests, limit their product development or product deployment. They can still retain those ranges.
Right.
But for purposes of reporting and understanding as LEA and be able to report to government and say how much funding is going to the sector in itself and how we define it, then we'll be able to sit down with banks or, okay, our range is from 200 million, less than 200 million, to 15 million. And there are subcategories in between. The micro is turnover is 200 million. The largest is about 15 million. So we'll be able to sit down and standardize that data, disaggregate their data, and be able to package it and report on the SMME sector in terms of the key performance indices. So it doesn't stop them from funding their own definition because it's informed by their commercial objectives.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that they should change the way they've been doing things.
No, it doesn't. But what it will help us do is to understand how much, for example, access to funding the SMME sector is getting and come up with corrective measures. That will also speak to the sort of funding instruments we are developing and deploying. Are they the correct ones? The funding gap that I talked about, it seems we've been, misfiring or just throwing darts in the dark. So if we come up with very clearly defined funding instruments that target your micro, your small and medium, we should be able over time to be able to close that funding gap without necessarily forcing banks to change their commercial objectives.
Right. Yeah. We are talking a lot about funding. When we pivot and look at, okay, fine, we are talking about trying to come up with something that can be used universally within the country. But when we look at SMMEs and their performance at this point in time, is it something that we need to be looking at that or reorganizing how we not only view them, but how we treat them, how we help them?
I think it's an issue of both. How are they performing? And two, are we coming up with the right programming and the right interventions? That's critical. And that is also closely tied to the sort of interventions that we provide and their growth trajectory. A micro enterprise compared to your small or even your medium will not necessarily need the same sort of interventions. the Ministry of Trade and Entrepreneurship, in our discussions in terms of the strategy outlook, are quite clear that a one-size-fits-all in terms of business development interventions, we must let go of and now be targeted, more specific, and be more responsive.
Right. But I thought that's how you guys were operating, in that you are much more targeted, and this is why even LEA was established, because people could not, had to go to LEA to do certain things that they needed to do prior to being funded.
We are targeted insofar as we will do your sort of needs assessment in terms of you as an entrepreneur coming through. Okay, exactly, is it financial management, is it sales and marketing, bookkeeping, record keeping, so that is targeted. But within the broad sense of your programming, for example, if we want to come up with incentives for the SMME sector, incentives could be favorable procurement terms for the SMME sector. It could be lowered taxes, or support for exports, for example, in terms of export funding. We must be clear in terms of how we're going to support them, what it is that they need, and be targeted, because the firm level dynamics in terms of the size differentiation will never be the same, and hence their needs will never be the same. So we define the sort of interventions that we want to propel or deploy towards the sector.
Right. When we keep on talking about SMMEs, and you're talking about the legal definition of it, do Botswana understand what SMMEs are, and do they understand what your role is, your mandate is, and how you interact with them?
Well, it's hard to give a very conclusive answer, but what I do know is right. We don't differentiate in terms of size. In very, very general terms. And then you'll probably have your informal sector, which is, generally survivalist or enterprises that are operating below the regulatory regime in a way. They're informal. But in terms of understanding, the specific needs, that is where we are going, because we want this to become a national agenda. If there is one thing that this economic downturn has really showed, is that in terms of, developing the SMME and SMME sector, and if you look at other countries that have, defined their SMME sector, they have registration of SMMEs, because it is a continuum. You not only define, but you also register, so that you know the numbers, you know which sectors they are in, where they are located, to the extent to which women are participating, the youth helajal. These countries are doing well. Look at Mauritius. Mauritius, in terms of SMME sector contribution, 50% employment, and 35% contribution to GDP. In India, they account for 48% of exports. Of course, using their own definitions.
Definition, yes. I was going to say, what about using our own definition? We have figures for that.
Rona, we are estimating. I'm not going to say whether is it precise or definitive, but we are at 14.3%. It is very, very low, even compared to comparator countries or countries that we normally compare ourselves to. This SMME contribution, really healthy, should be north of at least 30%. And moving up in terms of contributing to GDP, employment, So we really, and it is helped by the fact that in these countries, by the define, by the register, and are able to monitor, measure, and respond, and come up with the right interventions.
Right. How do you think that, because ultimately that's exactly what you want to end up being able to do, but how will it help the overall economy? How is it supposed to be a part of in the ecosystem?
SMME sector you cannot separate the SMME sector from the economy, in that a healthy economy, a healthy balanced economy requires a substantial, active, vibrant and resilient SMME sector, because they contribute a lot to employment. As Mauritius is doing well in terms of economic indices and in terms of just, the management of the economy. But the biggest buffer there in ensuring that this economy remains on a firm trajectory is a very, very competitive SMME sector. As I said, they contribute 50% to employment and 35% to contribution to GDP. Now, the good thing about the SMME sector is that in terms of developing them and in terms of ensuring that there is funding, that is a matter of getting our policy and regulatory frameworks right and ensuring that there is dedicated, support, a focused support. And isimulagaone definition, isimulagaone registration. So an economy without, a vibrant SMME sector is highly vulnerable to both internal and external shocks. Right now, the only option or opportunity, or in real terms, of creating employment is driving banana into the sector, owning businesses, not only looking for jobs, but it must be in a very stable, very supportive and predictable environment so that they're able to grow those businesses. It's one avenue of dealing with youth unemployment as an example of how SMMEs can actually, be a strong cushion for the broader economy.
Right. You are conducting these consultations. How long is it going to take? When are you going to finalize that? And then what will happen after that?
I believe we are conducting between today and tomorrow, the last consultations and engagements. We have engaged commercial banks. We have engaged other, ecosystem entities, the academic institutions, Bank of Botswana. They're all part of this conversation in terms of trying to define the SME. We hope that, after these engagements, we'll have clarity in terms of what the concerns of the stakeholders are and, how they view or what they think, how we should define the SMME sector as a whole. We hope before, by mid-December, we should have more or less submitted what we need to submit to the ministry, and they will make that determination. They may also want to validate, obviously, in terms of their own assessment of where we are in terms of defining the SMME sector. But by December, definitely.
Right. 10 seconds, your last word.
No, I think this exercise has been founded on a very firm platform. We are very, very happy for now with the response of the stakeholders. For us, as an ecosystem leader in the development of the SMME sector, it just shows that indeed, in terms of stakeholder support and engagement, we're in a very firm footing. And I think there is, I'd say, a bright future for the development of the sector.
Let's just hope so. Yeah. We will be keeping an eye out for the development in that area, but unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for coming through to the Daybreak. Local Enterprise Authority Caretaker Chief Executive Officer, Thato Jensen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there for now, and we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, your news.